The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
The following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
By tomorrow, I will rule the world!
You think he's gone? He's not gone. That's the whole point. He's never gone.
Is this some radical new therapy?
You see?
Well, I must have not been paying attention when you were just talking to me. Do you think that you could repeat the question? And I listened more attentively. There must have been something in all of that.
All right, we got to post it on my page. We're going to post it on the Valley Patriot page. Let's get it up on Twitter.
And I must have missed something when you were just talking to me. I must have not been paying attention.
All right, I think we're good. You good over there?
I'm great.
All right, let's get this show on the road. Hi, how you guys doing? My name's Tom Duggan here at the Paying Attention Podcast. Hi atop Two Guys Smoke Shop at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. We've got a real good treat for you today. We have a debate for the 14th, it's the 14th, right? 14th Essex District, which nobody really cares about but except for the candidates.
Hey, now.
But just so we can distinguish which district it is between two, there's no incumbent in this race. This is a seat that was held by Christina Minicucci, and they changed the district. So she's not running for re-election. We have two people running to fill that seat. First, to my left, Adrianne Ramos, and to her left, to your right, Joe Finn. And the rules of the debate are there really are no rules. So I'm not going to ask you, like, can you solve world peace? You've got 30 seconds, okay? Nobody learns anything from that. So we're just going to ask you to just be mindful of the time. The only time I'm going to jump in is if somebody asks a question, doesn't let the other person answer it. Or if someone's getting too much time and talking over someone, I might just jump in to be fair. Otherwise, I'm just going to throw out a topic, let you guys talk to each other, and if there's anything in particular you want to talk about, feel free to bring it up. Why don't we start with you guys just introducing yourself, tell people who you are, give them a little bit of a snapshot of like who you are as a person, and why it is that they should vote for you, and whoever wants to go first, I'll let you guys decide.
Sure. Well, I'm right here, so I'll go ahead and go first. My name's Adrianne Ramos, and I am a resident of North Andover. My husband and 3 kids and our lovable Labradoodle live there. So I'm a mom of 3. My girls are 8, 10, and 12, and they all attend North Andover Public Schools. I am a lawyer by trade. I've been a litigator and a family law attorney my entire career. Started out working actually in the judiciary, then I did some public policy work, and now I've been at a firm in Boston for some years. And in that capacity, I really have gotten to see, families and understand what they're going through and the struggles that are faced by our Commonwealth and by the families throughout. So that is a little bit about me. I am running because the seat was open, and I thought it was time to kind of put my money where my mouth is. Tom, you probably could appreciate that. I have a lot to say about things and how things can be better, and I think my skills in the courtroom can translate into being a strong advocate for our district in Beacon Hill.
All right. Well, thank you. Good luck. Joe?
Well, thank you, Tom. Thanks for hosting this. I really appreciate it. What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about myself and then why I'm running, as you mentioned, and then some of my experience. So I am a resident of North Andover. I've been there for 22 years. My wife and I raised 3 kids there. They all graduated from the high school. My wife actually graduated from the high school. She actually grew up in North Andover. My father-in-law actually has a street named after him in North Andover.
Can you pull the mic a little closer so I can hear you better?
Can you hear that
great.
now?
Thank you.
I was very much involved in the community. I coached youth basketball and baseball for 15 consecutive years. So I did a lot of district work, a lot of travel work. And so I never thought it would end, but it did, and now I miss it. So that's one of those things. One of the reasons I'm running for the state rep position is because some of the policies that we see out there, I think, are causing a lot of struggles for the people that are out there in the 14th Essex District. If you look at it right now, we're number 4 in outward migration. With that, they're taking about $2.5 billion worth of revenue with them, and a lot of that has to do with their tax policies. So anytime you think about state aid, think about the people that are leaving. It is so much so that it's actually more than all the other New England states put together when they leave. And they're going to a lot of lower state climates. in that. Also, with the businesses, we're worried. I'm very worried about the small businesses. Right now, we're ranked 34th in the country for the tax climate. It could go to 47, they're saying, if we vote yes on question 1, because that's going to hurt small businesses. So I'm worried about that. New Hampshire is ranked number 6th in business climate tax. So you can imagine that this is where they're all going. So that is a big concern. Let me tell you this. I started knocking on doors on May 8th. To date, I've knocked on 6,000 doors. I've talked to probably about 1,500 people. Now, why did I do that? What I wanted to do is just go out and talk to them about some of their struggles and what they really are concerned with, because it's a lot different when people read it in the paper, see it or listen to it on the radio. If you go out and talk to these people, it's amazing how frustrated and angry they are. I went to a business, and just real quick, it was in Amesbury with the business owner. She had tears in her eyes. It was unbelievable. I've had people in the driveways talking to me. I'm thinking, these guys are going to stroke out in the driveway. That's how angry they are out there over what's going on in Massachusetts. So it's always good to go out there and talk to them about the issues. And what are they concerned with? They always talk about, of course, is inflation, but tax relief in order to help them with inflation. Overdevelopment comes up a lot in these towns. State aid comes up in these towns. Fentanyl coming over, what are we going to do? They're starting to get into the communities. Comes up in these discussions. Also, demonization of the police comes up in these discussions. And let me talk to you a little bit about that.
We're going to get into all of that. I just wanted you to do an introduction.
Hold on. Let me just talk about my experience, and I'll get right to that.
All right.
I spent a career in federal law enforcement. I started with the Postal Inspection Service, and we did all types of crimes. We did drug cases, we did identity theft, we did child porn, we did fraud against seniors, identity. So we did a lot of different types of cases. Then I moved over to the Office of Inspector General, and I want to get to that. Because what happened is that federal law enforcement was split, and so it went over to the Office of Inspector General. We did all the internal crimes. What they asked me to do is build the entire Northeast area field office, and it was brand new. So when I got to Boston, when I got to the office, it was me. That was it. I had a desk and a chair and a file cabinet, and they asked me to build this entire office, and that's what I did. By the time I was done, I developed all the office all throughout New England. I had every single special agent, forensic examiner, administrator in that place. The reason I say that, all right, and the reason I say that, right, is because I understand what police need. I know about their resources because I got all their resources for them. I know about funding because I got all their funding for them. The police learned one. Wait a second. The police learned one thing. You know what that was?
We'll make it up on the other end, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, it can be equal time, right? She can have equal time, right? What we learned from that, from the police unions, is that those people who actually do the work understand their needs, and they learned a valuable lesson because of the reform bill. That was one of the worst pieces of legislation that we've seen, right, for police. All right. When they called over for those people that endorsed them,
I got to cut you off because you're killing all my topics.
There were crickets on the other end, right? I think they've learned the lesson because, listen, I talk to people. Everybody now is for public safety, right? I hear it. Hey, my third cousin on my wife's side is a policeman someplace. I'm for public safety, right? They've learned their lesson, I think. And so that's my experience with that. And so thank you for listening.
All right, I'm going to give Adrianne an opportunity to answer anything that you just said because you kind of killed some of my topics, and we will go back to them.
You know what? That's okay. Why don't we just jump right into it? We'll make up the time. I'm not worried about it.
All right, before we go forward, I want to thank my sponsors. Sal DeFranco, candidate for state senate, AFC Urgent Care North Andover, Pleasant Valley Landscaping in Methuen, Clear Path for Veterans New England, which both of you guys should be supporting. They help homeless veterans. Borelli's Deli, EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Lazy River Products, and our good friend Matt McLennan at McLennan Real Estate, Century 21 in Methuen. So why don't we get into the first topic? And Joe talked a lot about the taxes and some of that financial stuff. So why don't we start off with inflation and the price of gas and the price of groceries. What will each of you do to try and make life a little easier for the people in your district? And since Joe had so much time, we're going to let Adrianne take this one first.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. So, look, I want to talk about what I can do as a state representative, right? Because That is very different than what the federal legislation can do. And, inflation isn't just a federal issue. It's a national issue. It's an international issue. And as a state representative, there's only going to be so much we're going to be able to do. We can't end the war in Ukraine.
Right.
I'd love to end the war in Ukraine, but, we can't do that. So we have to work with what we can do, and what we can do is continue to offer aid to families that are struggling. We can continue to offer free meals in schools, which helps so many families actually be able to feed their children every day. We can continue to offer fuel assistance and oil assistance. We can continue to offer rental assistance. So, there are programs already in place. I'm not going to be able to curb inflation as a single state representative. What I can do is make sure that the families it's affecting is getting access to services, and those services and assistance programs are funded.
Do you think, if you don't mind me just asking, do you think that the people who are eligible for these services, whether it's home heating assistance, it always seems to be the people at the very bottom, and the people who are kind of in between the bottom and the middle always kind of seem to get squeezed out? Doesn't it seem like we should expand the income levels for the people who can, with what's going on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I will tell you that I think that is absolutely a problem. And I see that even in legal services. You see people who are unable to, get counsel but don't qualify for free counsel. So that is across the board. We need funds to do that, right? So we need to, the money isn't going to grow on a tree, like my mother would say. So we have to be mindful of making sure that we have the state revenue.
In under an hour. Just kidding, it's a joke. You guys are supposed to laugh at that. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm laughing.
Yeah.
When it comes to when you go out there and talk to these people, all right, like I said before, I went and talked to, it was Heritage Village in Amesbury. It was a person, elderly person. It's in government housing, and she's saying, how am I going to pay for my prescription drugs? She goes, because everything is going up. And when I started knocking on doors, it was gas, it was food, right? Then it changed for electric and gas. What these people are looking for is not for us to solve inflation, because that's going to be done at the federal level, right? That's going to be on the fiscal side, right? They're going to draw money out by bringing up the interest rates.
But there are things
right?
you guys can do to help that too.
And that's the thing, right? You can do it through tax credits, you can do it through tax cuts, and you can do it through tax rebates. That was all. You can do it even in the gas tax in terms of if it goes above $4 a gallon, I would cut back on the gas tax. All right, I'm committed to.
And I agree.
I'm committed to 62F, and that's being done right. Chapter 62F, which is being done now. The economic development bill had everything in it. All right, but it was held up for 4 or 5 months. There was no reason for that. There were people out there suffering. They had a lot of things in there that they needed. And let me tell you a couple of things, just so you know. And this is what the people were looking for, all right? $30 million added to the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program would have been great for them, all right? Was held up for 4 or 5 months, right? It was $300 million to cover the waivers, right, on thousands of Massachusetts job claimants. These are the overpayments. Now, where I was, right, we used to investigate that stuff, right? They're just waiving that stuff. That's going to be saddled with the small businesses, right? There was a tax cut, right, for the small businesses, and I don't even know if they're getting it anymore, right? The state could have done that. That was in the Economic Development Bill. There was a lot of things in that Economic Development Bill that they should have passed 5 months ago. All right?
If I could just briefly
absolutely, you can break it anytime you want.
So just briefly on that, the Economic Development Bill that he's talking about that's been held up was held up because the funding source, the primary funding source for that Economic Development Bill was the 62F funds, which have now been returned to the taxpayers of Massachusetts, which you just said you supported. And I support as well, and I think it's great that that money went back. But we can't have an Economic Development Bill, again, without a funding source.
Yeah, Joe.
No, that's not true. They knew from the beginning. There was $7 billion in that bill, and now and actually they're passing it right. They're trying to pass it right now, right? I think it's on Governor Baker's desk. That's not true. They knew from the beginning, right, that initial 62F, Chapter 62F was covered, and so was the economic bill. That should have been passed 6 months ago, in my opinion, because it had everything in it almost everything in it that we needed for a lot of relief for people. So when we talk about inflation, it's the relief that they wanted from the inflation. That's what I talk about a lot. But let me tell you this, why it was held up, all right? One of the reasons it was held up, right, it was the Massachusetts Teachers Association, all right? Massachusetts, they sent a letter, all right, to House and Senate leadership in late September, which implores lawmakers to pause consideration of future tax cuts, either permanent or temporary, until the next legislative session. All right? Not even now.
That's not uncommon.
Right? Now the
It's not uncommon in an election year.
Now the Massachusetts Association, right, is funding my opponent's campaign.
Yes, they
all
are.
right?
I'm proudly endorsed by the Massachusetts Teachers Association. That's true.
Instead of giving the $30 million to the low income for housing, giving people like I talk to out on the doors, right, who have tears in their eyes, the elderly who are saying, hey, how am I going to pay for my bills? No. And why did the Massachusetts Teachers Association want to further cut? Because they wanted debt-free college. That was part of it. Debt-free college.
That sounds terrible.
Right? Debt-free college. And this is about priorities, right? When you leave here today, right, always think of state aid. I am looking for state aid for the people in my district, right?
But how are you going to get state aid if you're going to cut taxes?
And I want to prioritize spending. It's nice. All of the things that we're talking about are good, but you got to prioritize where you're going to spend. And for me, state aid is number one. That's where I want. You need the tax.
But you're telling your voters that you're going to cut taxes. How are you going to cut taxes and get them this aid? You can't.
You can do both. They had $7 billion. It was in both bills. Now, and then what we did is in the second bill, it was just. Did you read the bill?
You do have to cut your answers down because you're getting 3 times more amount of time as she is. That's just not fair.
Did you read the bill?
Yes.
You read the bill.
But again, we're talking about funding.
Did you read the bill?
I read the bill.
Did you read the second bill? That was just.
Yes,
that second bill hasn't been out. It's not. Did you? What?
No. I'm sorry.
See, that's
you're talking. No. No. Now you can let me finish. You're asking me 5 questions at once. I read the original economic bill. And what I'm saying is that the reason that big part why it couldn't go forward is because the 62F funds were a good portion of that. So they couldn't go forward with passing that and considering it because it didn't have the full funding source. So we've talked about that, Tom. I'd love to move on to another topic. And if we're going to talk about legislation, maybe we should talk about the importance of transparency because I know that that's important to you.
Huge.
And
so let's do that. Let's talk about transparency.
So let's talk about transparency. So, one of the things I have been asked right from the beginning is whether I will be transparent and whether I would support transparency at the legislature. I will support that. And, Joe here, his website says he supports transparency. If you support transparency, why are you blocking voters from your Facebook page and deleting known voters, comments and messages on your Facebook page?
Let me tell you about...
No. Just please answer the question.
Since May 8th, I have been going out and knocking on doors.
I understand you're knocking doors.
You don't
just answer the question.
Right? So I've been going out. Now, I am the probably most visible candidate in Massachusetts. I've been to 6,000 doors. I have answered hundreds of emails. I've answered hundreds of phone calls. I've answered hundreds of texts. I've answered people on my website. I am the most visible person out there. Now, banning somebody on your website, right, who was part of someone else's campaign, and I run this through a group of people, not myself. In order for gotcha questions, those individuals are taking away from not only my time, but the time of the residents that I'm trying to represent. I've got people in all of these towns trying to ask me questions, and they deserve answers that are done in earnest. We understand trolling, and that's what we have. We've banned probably a few people out of the thousands of the people that they have gone out and talked with, but there was nobody more visible than me going out there and talking to people and listening to people. No one.
Okay, so again, the question was about transparency. You are blocking voters, people who would be your constituents, because they support me?
No. These individuals,
Then why?
As far as I know, and based upon the people that are working with me, are simply people that are volunteers from your campaign. They recognize what gotcha questions are. We really have to be honest about this. This question, in and of itself, will tell you a lot about the character of the individual I'm going up against. Everything I just talked about, all the people out there that are hurting and struggling with all the policies, and I get a question about a few people that I've banned because they're trolling us from her campaign.
So I'm sorry. So when people ask you questions, policy-related questions,
them.
because they are supporters of me, you are blocking them and not answering them.
I don't.
Right?
I think people,
and they would be your.
There's a lot of love in this room.
Well, it's interesting. And the longer we go with this, I think it's the more that you can see.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Are you answering people's questions about reproductive rights?
I just told you I answer questions all the time.
So, Joe, where do you stand on reproductive rights?
All right.
If you were elected, are you pro-choice?
Wait, before you go forward, I can't let you get away with that. When you say reproductive rights, you're talking about abortion.
Abortion.
Okay.
Are you pro-choice or are you pro-life?
Okay, listen, and this a lot of times when I go out and ask people this, and I'm going to talk to you about when I go out there and talk to people on the doors and talk to my constituents out there, all right, because this question does come up, all right. And what I know, over the last 2 years, what we've seen, and the reason I'm in this campaign, right, is we've seen policies that have reduced state aid to our people. We've seen it ruin our economy. We've seen fentanyl coming in, demonization of police. We've seen a lot of these changes that are hurting the constituents in our districts. The one thing that has not changed, all right, is abortion in Massachusetts.
That isn't answering the question. Are you pro-choice or pro-life? Yeah, but you know what? With all due respect, I've been giving you a lot of time, and you're not answering.
I am. So nothing has changed in Massachusetts except in Massachusetts. Abortion has stayed the same. Established law. Now, I am not running to change that law.
That doesn't answer the question.
I'm not here to change.
Your voters have a right to know, because guess what?
Can I finish?
Okay, go ahead. Tell us where you stand.
But you've got to answer the question.
Are you pro-choice or pro-life?
Right? It's all about restrictions, right? Because when I talk to people about pro-life, I find that they're more pro-choice. I talk to people about pro-choice, they're more like pro-life. When you ask questions about it, you ask about restrictions, right? So I am not going to change anything that's in the law right now. What I will vote against, all right, is any expansion of abortion in Massachusetts. I will do that.
When you say expansion, do you mean
expansion of no lessening
late terms?
Right,
okay.
Exactly. I will not vote for that.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
So, but I'm not asking you if you would be in support of expanding the rights now. I am asking you if you are pro-choice or pro-life. And you still haven't answered.
I just gave my answer.
No. What you said was that you wouldn't vote to expand the right.
That's right.
So that's a difference. Because if you were elected, because, as you know, the Dobbs decision put the power of, or the control of reproductive rights and abortions back in the hands of the state. So you say it's settled law, it's not settled. Because that's how state laws work, right? We run, the legislature change, and laws evolve, they change.
In fairness, though, not everyone falls in the category of pro-life or pro-choice, because there are a lot of people who are for abortion in the first trimester, but not after that.
Okay.
Some to the second trimester, but not after that.
Okay. So if he wants to give a more clear answer on that, I'd be happy to hear it. But right now, this is an issue that is very important to many voters across this district. And if you've knocked on 6,000 doors, then you know that. Because it is an issue, it is very important, and it could change if the legislature changed.
It's not going to change, but
that's diminishing it as an issue.
No. Right now, Massachusetts has the widest access to abortion in the entire country. It actually got wider before the Dobbs decision. We had the Roe Act, right? So it expanded it even more, right? But from this time, when I get in office, right, I am accepting established law as it is, and I'm not here to change it. Now, I can tell you this, right? I have told that to the people that I knock on doors, and they accept that. If my opponent doesn't want to accept it, that's up to her. That's my answer.
Fair enough. My question is, because most people, we know abortion is not going to go away in Massachusetts, right? But what will come before the legislature is what kind of restrictions there would be, and you said that I've asked this in other debates, so I'll ask it here. Do either one of you favor any restrictions on abortion? Do you support abortion on demand up until the moment of birth? Do you support schools being able to take underage girls for abortions behind their parents' backs? Is there anywhere in this abortion debate where you would have a restriction?
Well, I don't know of any
Either
schools who take children to get abortions behind their parents' backs.
You live in North Andover?
I know that there's a judicial override, but I do not know of schools
Yeah.
who bring children to get abortions. But I believe that a decision to have an abortion is a decision between the female and their healthcare provider. And guess what? When I had to make that decision, when I miscarried twins and it wasn't complete and I had to make the decision, I was lucky enough to live in a state where I was able to have an abortion. And I was able to be here sitting with you and caring for my children. It wasn't an easy decision to make. It wasn't one I ever thought I would talk about publicly, but it was a decision that I had to make, and I had to choose my health over a pregnancy that had essentially ended. And so, you know what? I don't think we should be getting involved.
So you don't favor
with
any
that.
restrictions?
I think that I think the laws as it is written now is sufficient to cover that. We don't see doctors saying you have a viable pregnant child that could be born now that we're going to terminate. And I also had a premature child who was born at 32 weeks. So I know that pregnancy, like neonatal services is evolving. But we cannot speak to the individual experience because we are not in the room with the provider. And those are very difficult decisions to make. And so we, as a legislatures, we should not be sitting on someone's shoulder and limiting that and making families have to choose.
So your answer is no restrictions?
My answer is, as it is now, but there isn't anybody who was doing abortions at 40 weeks, at 35 weeks.
In Massachusetts?
What? Tell me one doctor who's done an abortion at 40 weeks.
I don't have a list of doctors in my head, but I know for sure partial birth abortions are happening all over the state.
At 40 weeks. At full term.
At full term, yes. Yes. Joe, do you have any restrictions on abortions that you would support?
Well, the only thing I can say is that's transparency for you. It's like unbelievable, right?
I'm not sure what you mean. I literally just said I do not believe there should be any restrictions.
I don't think you should. Yeah, for any. Yeah, my stance is the way it is right now. So it's like I don't believe.
Which is what?
I don't believe in abortions anytime for any reason. That's the thing.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. One of my biggest issues is the homelessness issue, and I'm even more infuriated in the last couple of weeks to find out that while there are 150 people sleeping on the streets of Lawrence and another 300 or so people sleeping on the streets of Lowell, that the state saw fit to use state tax money to put illegal aliens up in a nice warm hotel room in Methuen right next door.
Well,
so I'd like to know what you guys think about the homelessness and addiction issue, and should we not be prioritizing Americans before we are spending money on people who aren't supposed to be here?
So here's the thing, Tom. None of them were undocumented. The mayor of Methuen has issued a statement. None of the individuals that were housed at the hotels in Methuen were undocumented.
Does that mean because we documented them after they
No.
You're saying that they were legal aliens.
They were all persons of status, and actually some of them were U.S. citizens. Some of them were just families that were moved from the South Shore because there were no other locations for them.
Okay.
So it wasn't a matter of choosing, one group of people over another group of people. That wasn't what actually happened. I think that because a lot of the families were of other country descent, that was what the appearance was. But the mayor of Methuen has said it. None of them were out of status.
Okay. So on the homelessness and opioid addiction problem, it's the biggest problem I think in the state, and it's one thing that nobody in the legislature has been able to effectively address. The governor's not been able to effectively address it, and it's getting worse and worse as the economy gets worse and worse. How do we take these people off the street? How do we get them into detox? How do we get them? How do we get them off the streets from committing crimes and living out in squalor? I mean, we go down to the banks of the Merrimack River, and you've got to see some of the conditions these people are living in.
And I'll tell you, one of the things that I'm running for, and one of my passions is really making sure that we are dealing with this mental health crisis. And I'm sure if you're seeing these people out there, that you would agree that the mental health crisis has really, if not created that situation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that have addiction issues, it started out with simple, treatable mental illness, and then spiraled uncontrolled and out of control. And, I think people have to be willing to get help. You know that, right? But we do need to be able to offer services. We need to have a more robust mental health system. We need to be able to make sure that our mental health system is coordinated and is wrap around for particularly like school-age children. We have a disconnect between school and mental health providers, but we don't have enough mental health providers right now. We don't have enough social workers. We don't even have enough prescribers. We don't have enough beds, psychiatric beds. So yes, those are all things that could possibly help. But we got to get in there. We got to do the work. We have to figure out how we're going to fund that. It shouldn't just be nonprofits and volunteers who are out there doing that work. Absolutely not. We need to address it, and we need to stop turning a blind eye to the mental health crisis.
What is the solution, though? Because you can give people mental health services all you want. If they're sleeping on the banks of the Merrimack River, it doesn't really help.
It doesn't help them, no. But I think it helps us to get to be more preventative, right? So that those numbers aren't there. And for those that are there, they absolutely should be offered shelter. They should be offered hotel rooms if they're not available. They should be offered further job training and other relief. But we have to fund those programs.
Yeah, I agree and disagree. First of all, in terms of most of these people have substance abuse problems and mental health issues. You need to work with the agencies that are most able to work with these and get their experts and have a working group and talk about that. But I could tell you right now, right, there are people out there that are working at this and have been very successful. Have you ever read the book? It's Michael Schellenberger. I just came across them. He's working with the people in LA right now, and he says, yeah, a lot of people think, hey, we can just take these people and we can just go give them job training, right? Give them skills training. He goes, you can't do that. First of all, you got to shut down the encampments. He goes, you got to ban those. So you have to get politicians, maybe even people in the city. Like if you had Lawrence here, committed to doing that. A mayor was committed to doing that because it's going to take some funds.
But the problem with that. Hold on. But the problem with that, Joe, is former Lawrence Mayor Dan Rivera tried that.
Yep.
And he went to all the homeless encampments, and we screamed bloody murder when he did it, and he bulldozed all of them. Took all of their possessions, bulldozed their tents, whatever it is that they had, and you know what they did? They moved a block over. They didn't go to another state. They didn't go to another country. They're still in Lawrence. They're just a block over. So you've only moved the problem. You haven't solved anything.
Well, what you got to do, secondly, right? You got to have some funding for that, right? But you also got to fund buildings, right? You got to have rehab facilities where they can go to, and it's there, right, that you can start the process and start training them. At that, you can't put them back where they came from, right? So you got to do job training. Then you have to get aggressive case managers to track their process. So you need more mental health workers, right? But you need to build the facilities first, get them into the mental health facilities, get them into the rehab facilities, all right? And then start training them, all right? 120 days later, if we're able to bring them out into the community, then we're going to track them, all right, through aggressive case managers. This is the process they're working on right now. And you can say whether or not it works or not, right? In LA, all right? This guy right here is doing it. This is what he's telling us that he needs to do. And he says the first step that he talks about, right? Legislation is the first step he talks about, right?
I think giving them a sandwich is the first step, if you ask me.
Shelter first, treatment first, housing earned, right? That's his process. But you can do this through legislation. That's what he's going to do, all right? But this is a guy, all right, who's doing this in LA right now, and he's having success. Those are the people you have to go and talk to and figure out how were you successful in Skid Row, one of the worst areas in LA. He was successful, right? Go there, talk to him, right? And then we can start you'll get some great ideas from these people who have done it and done it successfully. It can be done, Tom. If he can do it on Skid Row, you can do it in Lawrence. Don't say we can't do it. I think we can do it.
Every police chief that I talk to, every single police chief from Lawrence to North Andover to Methuen, wherever I go, says the same thing. If we were able to do a 30-day commitment when somebody overdoses and we Narcan them, that would put them into a system where they end up becoming dry because they're there mandatory 30 days, and it makes it a lot easier to get them into transitional housing and reintegrate them back into society. Should Massachusetts be walking down that road? Either one of you. You've had a lot of time.
I got to tell you, I haven't heard that. So I'm always open to learning more about different policies and different ways of going down that. I'm sure people further left than me might say, oh, we have to be careful of where we fall in that on people's right to freedom. But anything is worth exploring and learning about and seeing what else is out there. And I have had family members who have had addiction issues and struggled, and it's hard to watch. I mean, you watch. Some people want help or willing to have help, and others it's heartbreaking. Yeah. It's heartbreaking. And so sometimes you do need that something to jumpstart them. Sometimes that doesn't work either. So I don't know what the true solution is, but I'm not afraid to shy away from exploring what those possibilities are. And if that's something that is possible, let's talk more about it when this is over and I'm in, because we have to do something. Something has got to change. And simply saying, let's move them into these facilities. Yeah, I mean, when they're in triage mode and they're in the throes of addiction, job training isn't going to get them anything. It's not going to help them.
Sectioning people for 30 days, Joe. If the police have to Narcan someone, I talked to Lawrence police. They say we Narcaned a guy. He went to Holy Family. We put him in. He signed himself out 6 hours later, and we Narcaned him again 8 hours after that because he went out and he used again. Every chief that I talk to says the cops ought to have the ability to section someone for 30 days if they've had to bring them back from death. I mean, that's a pretty tough thing to do. I'm willing to try anything to solve the problem, Tom. So if that's a possible solution, I am for it. Absolutely. Oh, Roy Vesk's going to be happy to hear that. Education has been one of my pet peeves since I sat on the Lawrence School Committee way back 100 years ago, back in 1997, I think, Tom? Was it that how long ago? It was 1997?
That was the year I graduated high school.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old. Thanks for coming, folks. Good night. And one of the things that makes me so furious is since I was on the school committee, I've watched billions and billions of dollars be pumped into the education system and the quality of education getting worse, especially in low-income and minority neighborhoods. You can't tell me that the kids in Lawrence aren't just as smart as the kids in North Andover, but we spend twice as much money in Lawrence and they get an inferior education. How do we take that disparity? And throwing money at the problem hasn't worked. So how do we take that disparity of the quality of education a kid in North Andover gets versus the quality of education a kid in Lawrence gets, especially given we're spending way more in Lawrence? I mean, I think I don't think it's quite as simple as that. I think, I know people who teach in hard districts like that. And I also wouldn't say that education is worse than it was 30 years ago. I mean, my 7th grader is in a class called Applied Math and Science, and it's a really cool class. They're doing stocks, they're learning how to balance a checkbook, then they're also doing some cool like science and engineering stuff. I mean, it's an innovative class that was never in existence when I was younger. But I think a lot of the difference between towns like North Andover and Lawrence come from the family support and the ability of people to sit down and help their kids get, extra tutors and help them with homework and, make sure that they are up to par with their classmates versus, communities or the lower socioeconomic places where people are just working 2, 3, 4 jobs and don't have the time to give to their kids. And so I think that's one area where we can look at how can we support those families better? Mm-hmm. What can we do? And, throwing money at it and not following through and not making sure that we're tracking to see where the ups and downs go is certainly a component of it. Within this district, I've heard from some of the towns in the district that the Chapter 70 funding formula works, and others that say it doesn't work. So it is certainly worth looking into and seeing how we can better serve the variety of communities and how we can better serve those components, those communities in those neighborhoods. Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything she said. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. And I would concentrate, when it comes to the state aid, I would concentrate on the special education funding because it's not being, they're not even hitting the mandates right now. So I would absolutely handle that. And then when you get into the districts themselves, I mean, we can actually measure all this. We have the MCAS tests. Right now, I think North Andover, when they did U.S. best schools, high schools, they're like number 112, but they did it like 347 schools. And then the regional schools are a little bit better. I think Amesbury was 116 when they were measuring it in terms of the rankings. And so I think you can use the MCAS to judge how well some of these schools are doing against each other. But absolutely, I believe that, there's a lot more involvement here with the parents, with their kids in North Andover than in Lawrence when it comes to that, and I think it makes a big difference.
MCAS, do you support the MCAS?
Yeah, and look, there's no perfect system. There is no perfect system. Whether it should be mandatory for graduation, particularly coming out of the pandemic, I think is something worth exploring. But it is good to have a tool to measure our children's progress. It concerns me that teachers teach sometimes just to the, or feel pressured to teach to the test. But again, there needs to be something in place so that we can keep track of them. The other thing I hear on the education front across this district is regional transportation costs, which aren't covered and are supposed to be covered. So that's a concern from voters that I'm hearing in the 14th Essex. But I would agree special education costs, and particularly covering the cost of out-of-district placements, that can be quite burdensome on taxpayers, and on the local community and the local overall education budget. And so maybe it seems like we're throwing money at things and problems aren't being solved, but some of it is maybe going to those needs, and maybe we need to look at how much of that should be funded separately, or what else we can do to empower the school systems to keep those services in district.
One of the things that very rarely gets talked about in education, but is very effective for any community, is vocational training.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if either one of you would be okay with taking some of that education funding that's going to, especially inner cities, and mandating that if they don't have a vocational school in that area, that the public schools provide some kind of vocational training, because a lot of these kids from the inner cities don't go on to college and they don't have a skill when they graduate, and this would help them out.
Yeah, I love vocational training. I think it's great. I think more and more kids would probably get involved with it. I think once they leave high school, not everybody is meant to go to college. And so those people, and I know people who go to vocational schools and come out and become electricians or plumbers, they do
with no college debt.
No college debt.
Right.
They love it, right? And we obviously need that type of skilled labor anyway. So I am a big proponent of vocational training.
I have said right from the beginning of my campaign that expanding, access to education and ensuring that we are funding and getting good vocational education. I have members of my extended family who have vocational educations and swore by it and have done very well successfully in life because of their vocational education. And so, I absolutely think we need to shift. And I think you're seeing that throughout the Commonwealth. I think you're seeing people recognize that not everybody is destined to go to college, and that there is a way. And with the cost of higher education today, I think it makes sense for a lot of families, to do. And, again, I think you can make, and what we see? We see those people become small business owners, right? We see people who got their degree in landscaping or electrician become solo, business owners. And that only helps bring money into the district. I'm a small business owner here in Merrimack Valley, and, making it through the pandemic was challenging, and I think I can relate to small business owners who are struggling now. But there's nothing better than knowing that you are not only providing business to your community, but you're giving back directly to the community. Right. So I would love to see expansion of vocational training, but also seeing if we can help people as they get into the workforce and continue that into providing further grants for small businesses as people are becoming small business owners. And that's only going to serve our district better.
Anything else on education before I move on? Because I got a big topic I want to talk about next.
Nope, I'm set.
Okay. So question 4 is it's a big controversy. People have very strong opinions on both sides. It makes people very emotional. What do each of you think about question 4, which would allow illegal aliens to get driver's licenses in Massachusetts, which, by the way, would also allow them to drive in other states because there's license reciprocity. So someone gets a license in Massachusetts, they can drive in New York, they can drive in Nevada, they can come up to New Hampshire. What do you guys think, either one of you think about that? I'll let Joe go first since I let her go first last time.
Well, thank you. You're not going to cut me off, though. You're going to let me...
Well, but if you take 20 minutes, I'm going to cut you off. But otherwise, I'll let you go.
But I don't think it's a good idea. I think we hear the issue about the potential of using your driver's license for voting, and I think that's the big issue. But let me, in the basis of my decision is on this. This was a letter from Governor Baker, and this is what he said. The registry does not have the expertise or ability to verify the validity of many types of documents from other countries. Consequently, a standard Massachusetts driver's license will no longer confirm that a person is who they say they are. This bill also fails to include any measures to distinguish standard Massachusetts driver's licenses issued to persons who demonstrate lawful presence from those who do not. Additionally, it restricts the registry's ability to share citizenship information with those entities responsible for ensuring that only citizens register for and vote in our elections. This bill significantly increases the risk that non-citizens will be registered to vote. So that is what Governor Baker had mentioned, and that's the basis of my decision.
Well, I respectfully disagree, and
I'm shocked.
I know.
With me or the governor?
With both. And you know what? I think I'm probably more aligned with Charlie Baker otherwise, but I do disagree.
I doubt that.
No, I don't. I don't doubt that at all.
I do.
He's a little bit further left wing than people think he is.
Yeah.
But not that far.
Look. The law specifically says it shall not be used for voting purposes. And you know what? I am for it because I stand with police. Police across this Commonwealth have said that this is better to protect them, to protect the community, and it brings revenue in. It gives us the ability to, if you were in a hit and run accident and the car was licensed and registered, we can track the person who did it. We can find out, who was responsible for multiple crimes if people are licensed. And you know what? A lot of the concerns, the public safety concerns on the other side, we're not seeing the fallout or the repercussions of that in other states. And there are 17 other states that already allow people to drive undocumented immigrants. I will not call them aliens because I'm pretty sure none of them have green skin and big bulgy eyes. So, it is a public safety issue, and I support it. And you know what?
Can I ask you something?
This is up to the voters.
Can I ask you something? Did you talk to the police, and did they say that?
Yes, I have spoken to police officers.
Who did you talk to?
I'm not going to start naming names of individuals that I've spoken to, but I have spoken to several police officers who are in support of it.
No, saying it's a public safety issue.
Yes.
Because this is what happens when I talk to the Massachusetts State Police, and they've endorsed me, of course, and that is they say it's so they can identify these individuals. And being a law enforcement, that's important, but they do have a caveat, and that is if in fact they are who they are on the license, we can help identify that. So this is if you had asked them about privilege cards, would you be in favor of that?
What is that?
A driver's privilege card? It allows them to drive vehicles.
But that's not what question 4 is.
No, but I'm asking you, would you be in favor?
No, I'm in favor of license.
The reason I asked that is because Bruce Tarr, introduced that privilege cards, right? Because they have them in other states, right? You go to Connecticut,
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and so it's in place of driver's licenses because they're concerned that the driver's licenses will be used for voting. So when Tarr brought it up, right, they voted it down. And that's why my opponent doesn't want it. They want it for the voting. If they didn't want it for the voting, the privilege cards,
That's
right?
just
The privilege cards would be fine, right?
No.
What's the difference? Because the police, and when I asked the police this,
Sound a little conspiracy theorist over here.
They said that yes, they would in favor of the privilege cards. You know why? Because they said it would be able to identify the individual, which is why they want the driver's licenses. That's it. So it depends on what you.
So you're sitting here telling me that you honestly believe that people who are in support of question number 4 are in support of question number 4 primarily so that
for driver's licenses.
For driver's licenses, so that people who are not U.S. citizens can vote. That's what your concern. That they're going to vote.
That's what Charlie Baker said. You can argue against the governor all you want. It's okay. It's fine. But I'm telling you, and with the privilege cards, that's a thing that came up in the legislature.
This is the first time I've ever heard of a privilege card. This is great. We're educating the voters.
Yeah, that's why Bruce Tarr brought it up, right? Because he knows that they don't want it because they want them to vote. Right, so he brought it up. It's the same thing.
Well, let me ask you.
Let
me ask you. In all fairness, because you say like it's so outrageous, and how can anyone believe this? Would you be in favor of passing legislation that says absolutely illegal aliens cannot vote in Massachusetts?
We don't need to. That's already the law.
So the answer is no, right?
No. I have no. Well, first of all, again, I'm not going to use the term illegal alien, Tom. But if we need to be redundant and have another law that says people who do not have status in the United States and are not citizens cannot vote, absolutely, that's fine.
All right, fair enough.
I mean, it's unnecessary. It's
Right.
redundant. But if that will make you happy, sure.
I'd like
why
to move
not?
on to something else, unless you guys want to talk about this. Continue going on this. So we changed the state public records law not long ago. I had a large part in that because at the time I had asked Lawrence Mayor Willie Lantigua why he wasn't giving me the public documents I wanted. He looked me in the eye and said, there's no penalty in the law. So it says I have to give it to you, but it doesn't say what happens to me if I don't. So so we worked with Diana DiZoglio, Katie Ives, I think Jim Lyons at the time, to change the law. But right before it got passed, the legislature took out all of the language that said they had to comply with it and that the governor's office had to comply with it. Would you support a public records law that would say that the legislators and the governor has to comply with public records out of transparency? Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I'm gonna get a little lawyerly here. That's a pretty broad blanket statement.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it depends to me on what specifically are you talking about? Are you talking about every single email, every single are you looking for?
Yeah,
everything?
I mean, if you're a public official, if you're a city councilor in Methuen, every email that you send, I can send a FOIA request, and they've got to turn them over. Every text that you send during a public meeting, you have to. But if I want to know the schedule of my state rep last week, and I say, I want you to give me a copy of what your schedule was, they don't have to turn it over. If I say, I want to know any emails that you've sent back and forth to, say, the oil industry, before that oil industry vote came up, they don't have to turn any of that over. And I kind of think, in the spirit of transparency, if the legislature is going to be making the laws about transparency, they ought to be subject to the laws of transparency.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think there are probably some exceptions for public safety of the individual, right? So I've done a lot of work defending victims of domestic violence.
Right,
so and victims of stalking, and so I guess. Yes, I would agree, but I do think that there should be some exceptions, to provide for that safety level, because unfortunately, I have seen requests for public records used against somebody and used as a method to enact further methods of stalking or abuse, and so I always have to couch that with a little bit of there should be some protections built in, but I do think that there should be transparency, and like I said, I would support legislation that requires transparency.
Excellent. Jill?
No, I agree with that. I think there may be a few exceptions talking with personal information that you may find on some of these documents that have to be blocked out. But for the most part, we did it for a long time with the Freedom of Information Act.
Well, this is great because now my next question, I'm sandbagging you. This was all a big trick.
I should have seen it coming.
So the mayor of Lawrence 3 years ago, encrypted their police scanner. At the same time that they're putting up cameras in every neighborhood in the city. In other words, the government is watching us in Lawrence everywhere you go. Every stop sign you're at, every alleyway you walk through, there's a city government camera that the police have access to. And yet they've encrypted their scanner, even though they're supposed to work for us, so that we can't know what they're doing in our neighborhood. Now, in the age of George Floyd, in the age of us being told by the media about how cops are out there gunning down black men for fun, right? Doesn't it make sense that the state of Massachusetts would pass a state law prohibiting the police on regular police calls from encrypting their scanners? As it was before the encryption, if there was a drug deal, they had an encrypted channel that they could go to. If they went to a party and the music was being turned down because they heard it on the scanner and they had to keep going back, they could swap over to a scrambled channel. But in Lawrence and in Haverhill right now, all of their calls, all of their traffic stops, every domestic calls, everything is completely encrypted from the public finding out what they're doing. Would you guys support a law that would force police departments to be transparent on their public radios or on their radio systems? Whoever wants it first.
No. not until I talk to them. All right. Listen, I've been out.
I don't like that answer.
No, well, the problem is, Tom, I've been out. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you some of a case that we work drug cases, all right, in Chicago. We probably did a search warrant a day with drugs, all right, and we're working with CPD out there. And we're kind of, and this when I went out, we were on the south side of Chicago. This is very dangerous. I don't want anybody knowing. We encrypt all our radios when we go out there. But I'll tell you, so we go out there and we make controlled deliveries, and then you have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, when we've done controlled deliveries out there, we're hoping that the person opens up the package and then we can make the arrest, but you have no idea what's going to happen. I mean, I've been in cases, right, where they've come down and we see a van, they get into a van, right, no windows. We have no idea. I was on a case, no idea how many people were in there, whether or not they had firearms, anything, all right? I don't want anybody trying to track us in any way when we're out there. These are dangerous type investigations that we do, especially when it comes to drugs and weapons.
But there's an encrypted channel for those specific things. For regular traffic stops, for domestic calls, I used to go live on Facebook and I'd take my scanner and I'd be live at the scene at a shooting, and the mayor at the time was trying to say, Willie Lantigua was trying to say, violent crime is down by 1/3 in the city. But the people who followed me on Facebook knew that wasn't true because they saw me going to 3 or 4 shootings a night. Now, the police in Lawrence could tell us anything, and we have no way of knowing. We have no way of knowing on the regular traffic stops, on the shooting calls, on those kind of things. I think on the regular calls, I'd like to see some transparency out of the legislature for these police.
Yeah, I think we've done it. Truthfully, I think in terms of we've got them with body cameras already. All right, in my opinion, all right, I would be just thinking right off the top of my head, I would be against that. All right, but I would absolutely go out and talk to them to get their feelings on that type of issue. But I would be against that, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to talk with police.
I had so much hope for you.
You know, I think it's good in theory, right? But again, I just go back to my representing victims of domestic violence and having that just weaponized, like access to that kind of information just weaponized. And so, yeah, I there's probably a way to go about it and to do it, but I would want to learn a little bit more about the issue. And I don't want to sit here and say I absolutely this or absolutely that on a topic that I just don't know enough about. But I certainly would be willing to sit down, learn, talk to people like you, talk to people from the other side, kind of understand both sides. But I'm not a hard no, but I can't sit here and tell you I'm a hard yes.
I'm a hard no. I lived it. I know it. I'd say no.
All right. Okay. Well, I don't like either one of those answers. But I only get one vote on election day, so it doesn't really matter where I think. Is there one thing that either one of you completely disagree with your party on? I see so many people, especially in Washington and on Beacon Hill too, who just go 100% with whatever their party wants. And I think a lot of people are looking for people who are a little bit more independent. Is there at least one, maybe two issues where either one of you have a very strong disagreement on your party on a particular issue?
I'll address that because when I go to Beacon Hill, I know we're desperately in the minority, but I think it's important to try to work together with the other side. And this is what I tell people when I talk to them on the doors, because I don't know who's answering the doors. I've got Democrats that answer the doors. And I tell them when I'm running, I said, listen, if you come to me and you want help, I'm not going to be asking you if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, who you voted for. I said, I'm just going to help you. That's my job as a state rep. And so I'm more probably inclined, all right, to work across the aisle to try to get things done. And that might be a little different.
So you don't have any one particular issue that you could say, hey, the Republicans are really strong on this, and I don't agree with that at all?
Let me give it some thought.
Okay, all right. I was hoping you would have thought of it before now, but
yeah,
okay.
I wish I knew the question before.
Okay, well, that's not how I roll. You know that. You know that. Adrianne, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that came up in the last year was the dangerousness bill, and Governor Baker wanted to expand the dangerousness bill and dangerousness hold, and there were.
Can you explain what it was?
So it's essentially if there are certain types of crimes, people would be held pre-trial, and there's a dangerousness bill, a dangerousness hearing held, and so the bill would have expand the categories of crimes that would apply to, and many Democrats were not in support of that, and many.
And what would it do? It would. would it allow them to section someone who was potentially dangerous?
So essentially prior to going to trial, they would be, and prior to, kind of really early on in the process, they would be held without having that due process, kind of go forward. So you just have this dangerousness hearing. I'm trying to think to explain it in a way that the listeners are going to understand. And so a dangerousness hearing can be held, but right now there's a limited amount of categories of charges that's done on, and Governor Baker wanted to expand that, and I agree that it should be expanded. And there were many who did not agree with that.
All right.
And I think, and there were a lot of Democrats who agreed with that, and it had to do with sexual assault was one of them that they wanted to put in there, and that did not go. Or an assault where a person is strangling a person, anything to the throat was one of the issues that came up. And so, but it was almost like they had a Democrat there that was working with Governor Baker to try to get that through, and they just couldn't get it through. And there were a number of other issues, a number of DUIs that a person had. So, and it is a due process too, because they have the ability, obviously, to submit evidence, do a hearing. With that too, so it wasn't just, hey, you're not going to have a no bail, and then we're going to see you when you have your hearing or at the trial. So they actually have a process in place to protect their rights, even with the dangerousness bill. But that's what that was all about on that.
Adrianne, one of your buddies, Ed Lynch, sent in a question. He wants to know from both of you: do you support the Offshore Wind Act? And please explain what that is to people at home who may not know. And the Roadmap to Net Zero Act, and please explain what that is, if you know what that is too, so that at least people know what it is we're discussing.
Yeah, so the Offshore Wind Act was just passed this past August, and the Roadmap to Net Zero was passed previously. And they're sweeping climate reform bills, which make certain requirements across the Commonwealth for both the government and businesses in terms of reducing carbon and getting us to net zero, and also increasing offshore wind and adding job training, and really they're pretty broad sweeping, making us leaders in climate reform. But they still need to be implemented, and they need to be funded. And I think they're important for us and for, the next generation. I told my girls when we were discussing running for office, I said, what do you think is important? And they said, the planet can't get any warmer.
But they're just getting that at school, though. You know that, right?
But it's true. It's true. And so,
Boy, I wish I was the candidate right now, that's for sure.
It's so I am absolutely in support of those two bills and making sure that we're implementing them and we're funding them and expanding them.
Joe.
Yeah, they're talking about net zero emissions by a certain date, like what Charlie Baker's talking about. He's talking about 2050. We're talking about trying to do that, obviously, with the MBTA, trying to get those all electric by like 2035. The wind projects that are out there, part of the problem with that is they just lifted the caps. All right, the caps were such that every project that came after each other, they'd be lower in cost, and it was going to protect the ratepayers. Right now, they lifted those caps. All right, and the other problem is they had a major project. It was a manufacturer that was going to do the offshore wind project. He just came back and just said, hey, because of inflation, right, our pricing agreements have to be redone. So, and so they want more money. They're saying right now it's not even viable with the project that they have. So, here we go. I agree with this whole thing about getting to net zero, but not right now. I would not do it so quickly. We've learned some lessons out in California, right? I mean, they got rolling blackouts. So, what I would do is I would have a more balanced approach to the whole energy sector. I would not be declaring war on the energy sector as what's going on right now. And we're full steam ahead here in Massachusetts. I mean, piling. Trying to get electric MBTAs, and we're piling hundreds of millions of dollars in that. That is absolutely just such a poor-run system. No one's held accountable. We just pour money into it, and then all of a sudden we want electric vehicles by like 2035. So I would spread it out. I would get there. I would have a more balanced approach, and then I would put that money into state aid. My whole thing is state aid. That's what it is. That's my number one priority. So we have a lot of spending. This is a lot of spending right here because we just pile money into it. And now we have the guy coming. Now we have manufacturer coming back and say, hey, you know something? That's not viable. We want more money. And so we'll just pour more money into it. So I want to get there, no doubt, but I want it in a phased approach. And as we get better and better with solar, with wind and electric, then we phase out the fossil fuels. But it's causing so much pain right now. I would go into a more balanced approach. That's how I feel.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Question 1 is asking if we should have a constitutional amendment to raise taxes on millionaires in Massachusetts. Now, I'm not a millionaire. I made about $26,000 last year because I pour all my money into my business. But the state has, I think it's at $7 billion. Is it $5 billion? $7 billion surplus this year. So
with Chapter 62F.
So at the same time that the state is telling us we taxed you too much, that we have so much money that even after we spent everything, we still have all this money left over. Now they're asking for more. Doesn't that seem kind of hypocritical
the surplus was because of the infusion of federal funds.
That's why we have inflation.
But that's not. That's not going to happen every year. That's not a guarantee. This is having a surplus isn't something that we see year after year after year. So I don't think it's, I don't think we can say, oh, well, this year we had a surplus, therefore, unnecessary.
But increasing the taxes on millionaires, are you for it, against it?
I support question
You
number
do?
one.
Joe?
No.
You don't support it?
No, because it hurts small businesses. I mean, small businesses and those people who sell their homes. So I don't. Listen, they would tax it. They would tax the air you breathe. This is the problem, right? We're number 4 right now in net migration. Do we have to be number 1?
What do you mean by net migration for people who don't know?
37,000 people last year, all right, in 2021 left Massachusetts with $2.5 billion of tax revenue, all right? The businesses right now are at 34. They're saying right now for small businesses, all right, if they pass this, they're going to go to 47. And so this is why they're leaving in droves. You can't.
Don't hold back. If you want to jump in.
But small businesses, most small businesses are community based. So picking up your electrical job or your plumbing company and moving out of state is just not realistic for most people. I do not believe most small businesses are going to leave. And I think if we're talking about real small businesses, the impact on small businesses, if you're making more than $1 million a year, are you really a small business? Are you a micro business? Not really. Not really. I mean, the percentage of people that this impacts in this state is in fact minimal.
I wish I was the candidate because I want to disagree with that so bad.
Yeah.
I'm a small business. I'm an S corp, which means that
isn't your income isn't it taxed though at the income rate that you get, right?
Yes. So because we're an S corp, our business doesn't pay taxes.
No.
But as a shareholder, I have to pay taxes on what the company made. So we grossed, let's say last year, about $250,000. If I had a few more employees, if I had a few more people like me working, we easily could be up to $1 million, and then I'd be getting killed for $90,000. How does that help?
How does that help?
How does it help the Commonwealth? By taxing smaller, if you're telling a small business like me that if you work harder and you make more, we're going to take more of your money, what's my incentive to work harder and make more?
Well, that's just human nature. People are going to work harder and make more. I mean, that's.
But not if you're going to take it from me, though.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's the majority of the attitude. And the fact of the matter is, this is a question on the ballot, right? It's not a question as a state representative that I'm going to be voting on. This is brought
not necessarily true, because once something goes on the ballot and it gets accepted, the legislature does have to pass it. And we saw with gay marriage some 15 years ago, it was put on the ballot, and the legislature overrode it. So the legislature does have a say.
Right, but if you're asking me today, right, we're talking about a question that's going to the voters.
Right. Joe,
so it's up to the voters. Let them decide.
No, it's not surprising that they're taxing small businesses. I mean, that's all they do is tax people. The whole problem with Massachusetts is they spend too much. They tax too much. That's what they do, and that's why listen. The stats do not lie. People are. I told you we're number 4, and then the businesses are leaving also, and it's like they're going to New Hampshire.
But how? But you keep talking about
because they're number 6 right now in business tax
being your priority. State aid is your priority.
It is
expanding this. You can't have tax cuts and expanding state aid. They just don't really go together.
You know how I'm going to do it, and this is going to be a surprise for you, right? Cut spending someplace else, right? So what we have
that's a surprise. That was really condescending. But you know what?
It is because we have a wish list.
Oh, gee, a white man talking over me? Shocking.
Oh,
Well, that was kind of a racist comment.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
what I get in the courtroom all the time. And the fact is, I was talking and he was talking over me.
Well, that's what a debate is.
That's
Yeah.
that's, you know what?
So I
Like,
guess I won't debate anymore. I guess if they don't, what happens
So
when
we
they
want
don't-
you to talk to each other, but you really shouldn't talk over each other so
Right.
people at home can hear you.
and if you have a difference of opinion, this is what happens. They call you a racist. I mean, this
no,
is no
I didn't
different.
call you a racist.
No, I said her comment was racist.
Yeah, he
For
said
calling
my
her-
comment was
She
racist.
mentioned your race.
It was. Of course it was. But
It's a lot of love in this room. I'm enjoying it immensely, though.
If you go through the
But
bills,
where
if
are
you
you
go
going to
through, if you go through,
where are you going to cut?
one of the things I would cut, I had mentioned, I would go into a more phased-in net zero emission goal. So I would have a more balanced approach using more gas, more oil. I said, and then
More gas and more oil.
than we have right now. Right? We've declared war on the energy sector. I would not do that, and so I would have a more balanced approach in terms of energy, and that would bring down the costs. And as we get better and better, I wouldn't do what California's doing, asking people not to drive their vehicles or shut their lights off and have rolling blackouts. I would not be doing that.
Is there a tax that you would favor increasing, and is there a tax that you would favor decreasing?
No. That's all we do is tax here, Tom. That's all. Listen, they want to do.
So there's no tax at all that you would say, yeah, you know what, this actually would help the Commonwealth. You don't know any.
We had. I would favor the tax cuts and the rebates and the credits we had in the economic development bill with the $4 billion, and there's a ton of it in there that I would favor. All right. So, but listen, they wanted a consumption price tax. You know what that is?
No.
They had this in legislature. It's like they want people to go from their vehicles, all right, to the MBTA or public transportation, all right, during rush hour time. So what they do is they raise the cost of the tolls in the morning and then in the evening.
Yes,
all
and
right?
that's been successful in other states.
And so it's just another tax. I'm telling you, it's endless. If you go into the bills, it's tax after tax. But you have to tax because they do not want to prioritize spending at all.
Is there a tax
yes.
that you would decrease? Are there taxes that you looked at and say, even that's a little too much for me?
Yes, I would look at increasing the earned income credit. I would look at decreasing taxes for seniors. I mean, I think absolutely there are places where we should be and can be making tax cuts. I would increase the tax credits for families. I think there absolutely are places that there can be tax cuts.
What's the number one priority? If either one of you get elected, you're going to get sworn in January. I think January 4th, January 6th, something like that. And then you're going to start submitting bills right away because you've only got a few weeks before the deadline is for filing bills. What's your number one priority when you first get sworn in? You walk into your office. What are you doing?
My first priority is making sure that we're putting in budget requests throughout the district for all of these measures that we've talked about. You know, I've spoken with leaders throughout, every town in the city of Amesbury, and that's their priority, in making sure that they are getting the support from the state that they need. So that's first. And beyond that, looking at mental health services, because we need to address this crisis. We need to address it now. We need to address it now. It is a crisis. Whether people acknowledge it or not, we have to change something because we are seeing children and families and elderly and veterans who cannot get services. And if we can't get services, then as we've talked about, people spiral, and then we don't have good citizens. So if we can get better preventative services, we can be better as a society, better as a community, better as a district. And so dealing with and really digging right into mental health services is going to be something I will do right away, beyond just budgetary.
Day one, Joe?
I like that idea, but what I would do is I would concentrate on trying to increase the funding for our special education programs in the towns that I represent. I'd also go for regional transportation costs for the towns that I represent. So additional funding for the schools, Chapter 70. So all of those, we have unfunded mandates in all of those categories, and all of those towns are suffering, and have told me about it. That's what I'm going to do, is respond to what the people in my districts want, not my party. All right, it's going to be what's for them, and that's what they've told me to do. I'd be fighting also for a water filtration plant in Groveland because of the water situation. Water is always an issue in a lot of these towns.
You're bigfooting my next question again. It's almost like you're reading my mind, but go ahead.
Combined sewers that we have, right, where we have overflows into the Merrimack River, we need to fix the sewer lines in there. So, and it's all about state aid. I mean, mean, we talk about it. I know my point because, where you're going to cut. My number one priority is the towns. That's it. I'm going to be representing them. They need to have those costs, and we didn't get it in the economic development bill, but we need to have that done for our towns, and that's who I'm representing, and that's what I'm going after.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and we can go over as long as I can make it to Borelli's Deli by 4 o'clock because they close, and that's where I get my sausages on Thursdays. And speaking of sponsors, I want to thank McLennan Real Estate, Century 21 in Methuen, Lazy River Products in Drake, Best Cannabis in the Merrimack Valley, and by the way, best prices in the Merrimack Valley. Marsain and Son Construction, EIS Investigation, Borelli's Deli, Clear Path for Veterans New England, a free shout out to them, and Sal DeFranco, candidate for State Senate, and I'm sorry, I forgot, AFC Urgent Care and Pleasant Valley Landscaping. Joe, you kind of big-footed my next question. I was going to ask you guys, are there some local issues that aren't so broad as what we've discussed so far that you would tackle once you get in? North Andover and Groveland and West Newbury and Boxford and Amesbury all seem like they're very similar towns, but once you go into those towns, you realize they all have very unique needs and very unique problems. What local issues will you guys focus on?
Well, I think the combined sewer overflow is an issue. But the other thing that I've spoken with many people in parts of the district is really public safety and making sure that they're getting the funding that they need for equipment and training, and particularly the firefighters. There is a limited amount of resources in the fire departments in Boxford, Groveland, and West Newbury, and the fire department in Amesbury with their advanced life support system is often called out to provide mutual aid. And so they are pressed. And so I think it's important that we work with them and look at whether we need to regionalize the remaining towns or look at a better system because they are pressed. And there are times where I've spoken with the fire chiefs in a couple of the towns who have said that they have been concerned about whether they're going to be able to get to people in bad car accidents or get back to a fire because of their limited part-time departments.
And you wanted to call me to task because you say I got something wrong in one of my columns, and I promised you that I'll give you the opportunity.
You did.
I promised I'll give you the opportunity to set the record straight.
You did, and I appreciate remembering that. You wrote that I'm in support of defund the police, and I am not. Again, I've spent years representing victims of domestic violence, and police, good first responders, can make a huge difference in the life of a survivor or victim of domestic violence. Someone who was well trained in how to respond, how to recognize when someone is saying, no, I'm okay, and how to come back and really keep that individual safe is life-changing. And when I tell you it's life-changing, I have clients who have literally lived because of good first responders. And so it is important that we're training, that we're providing training, and we're getting, we're able to keep the police forces of the size that they need, that's appropriate, and that they are culturally competent and have bias training and any other training that they need. I mean, look, these are not people who are necessarily responding to situations in the same way a department in Lawrence might, but doesn't mean that their training should be any less or any different. And I think we have strong police force. I had a great opportunity to speak with some of the police officers in Amesbury, and they have said that the increase in responses to situations that are mental health based has been a challenge. So seeing if we can bring on social workers to work in conjunction with the police force, I think is great. And so none of those are part of the defund the police movement. I sort of joke, I'm not defund the police. I'm like fund them, because they really do make our communities better.
Well, you have our apologies if we made a mistake.
I
Joe?
appreciate that.
What was the question?
It was what specific, other than what you already talked about, what specific local issues to the various towns you're going to represent are you going to tackle? What are some of those unique problems in Boxford that North Andover doesn't have, or Amesbury that Boxford doesn't have?
I could tell you one of the big issues that I hear when I'm out there is overdevelopment, and it has to really do with the zoning that they're concerned with. And so right now, if you just talk, and I talk to people in the smaller towns, it obviously affects the larger towns, and North Andover is one of them, with high-density residential developments, which is really impacting a lot of the services in the town. We're very concerned about our water in there because we have a private lake. We're very concerned about the traffic. We had a report that came out in 2018 where it talked about the report, independent person came in and says, hey, you have a healthy inventory of multifamily homes in North Andover. What did we do after that? And then there were concerns. The concerns of the citizens were, hey, we have too much traffic. Hey, we got too much traffic going down our side streets. We're concerned about our water. And so concerned about the school capacity. And so what happened? The town then obviously approved like 600 units. What happened though is at Beacon Hill, they reduced the, it's called, I believe it's, I forget, housing choice, I think is what it was. And what they did, this is for housing development, they relaxed the zoning. And so now if you want to build a high density residential development, you only need a simple majority from the town as a super majority. Maura Healey has come in and says, hey, we're going to reduce that even more. Legislation does hurt us, and people are scared when they hear that type of language, that Beacon Hill wants to decide how these towns grow, as opposed to the people in the towns deciding how they grow and where they grow. And that's a problem. We had legislation where we had inclusionary zoning. And what happened there is that it was defeated, believe it or not, because what happens is that developers do not like to build affordable housing. And that's it. I mean, so... and
they don't make as much money.
They don't, because they have to subsidize it. So that went down in flames. But the thing is that, so that's one of the things that they're very concerned with. I can tell you about the policing. All right, the things on the mind, and I like to ask my opponent what she thinks of Post.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
That's the worst piece of legislation that's come across since my lifetime in policing. And
Well,
if
I may,
can I just finish, please?
Well, you asked her a question. It was
Okay.
let her get something in.
I actually was just going to say, as to the zoning change, that was actually a bill that was brought forth and proposed by Governor Baker and had bipartisan support in both in the House and the Senate. And it was part of the economic development bill that was geared at keeping businesses in the state, like you talked about. I mean, businesses are leaving the state not just because of the taxes, but because of the lack of housing and the inability to house their employees. And so it was designed to make it easier for people to be able to build housing. It is still up to the town. There still has to be a majority vote.
Super.
I think he's saying supermajority.
Well, no,
Yeah.
no, it went from a supermajority to a simple majority. So there still has to be a majority. There still has to be a majority vote in order for these for housing complexes to be built. So it is still in the power of the people of the individual municipalities to decide. But it is geared at and trying to keep businesses in the state, which is one of the things you've identified as a priority.
Good, Joe.
Yeah, in terms of Post. You could talk to any law enforcement agency. I don't care who it is. If that's not their number one topic, I mean, I'd be absolutely surprised. And this
What is it? Explain what it is.
That is peace officer standards and training. And so the big part of that is that how they handle misconduct within the police force now. They have a civilian board basically that does that, and they have broad powers, and that's the real problem. And that's what the policing do not like.
And how is this board? Is it appointed? Is it elected?
Yeah,
Who
it's
appoints
appointed.
them?
Yeah, it's appointed by the governor and then the AG, which is from law enforcement point of view is a big problem, because obviously you get a Democrat governor in there with the government AG, right? You're going to have ACLU attorneys in there. You're going to have all types of attorneys who probably don't like law enforcement, and so they have broad powers for decertifying and certifying officers, and that is a huge problem. And I can tell you this: one of the reasons, and maybe someone else can tell me. When you have applications from the Mass State Police going from 20 to 30,000 to 7,000 in their last exam, all right, that is a huge issue for them. Why are people retiring, right, when they can retire as opposed to staying on the police force? It's two things. It's Post and it's rhetoric, all right? We still have people, leaders in this community, all right, who still have harsh rhetoric toward the police. They're not respected. They call them abusive. They call them overpaid. They call them an existential threat. All right, those type of things that are said, all right, hurt the police. And I was in there, and I saw a part of that going on when I was there, and I saw it turning. Now it's on steroids,
yeah.
And that's why people, if you talk to the police officers, they hate that, all right, and they're very frustrated by it, and that's why they're endorsing me, because I'm a friend to the police, and they know it, all right, and if you don't know what Post is, all right, there's something wrong. Because that is the major issue with the policing right now. So it's not, and I'll tell you this, training. The police will tell you this too. Now, Joe, they're not defunding us. Because that's a bad word. We know what happened with the polls and defunding, right? So what happens is they're not even being properly funded. They have unfunded mandates for training. If you talk to police officers, they should have told you that. It's like, that's their big issue. It's like, hey, yeah, we're sending people to training, but we're not getting the money for it. They're getting some of it, but not all of it. I mean, this is a huge issue for them. How in the world that they would not have said that?
That's not what I'm hearing in our district. That's just not what I'm hearing in our district.
That is hard to believe.
Well,
Being in law enforcement.
I have one more question before we wrap up. We can keep going, right? Is that okay, Chrissy? Okay. Here's a question you never thought you'd hear me ask, but it came from another question from your buddy Ed Lynch. Gay and lesbian protections. If the Supreme Court cuts down gay marriage privacy protections for gays and lesbians, will you support gays and lesbians? It says LBGT with all the acronym LBGTQ : semicolon. But would you protect that community?
Yes,
is
hands
the
down.
question we have from Ed Lynch.
Yep.
Yeah, I support all people. I think they should be free. I think they should be safe wherever they go. I think they should never be discriminated against. And if anybody has an issue with that, they should come to me because I'm going to be able to help them.
Excellent. All right, let's give each of you, and I'm not going to time it, but just be respectful of the time, a few minutes to make your last pitch. This may be the last time, this will be the last time, unless you're knocking doors, that people will hear from you before they vote on Tuesday. Make your pitch and include how people can get in touch with you, make a donation, your website, all that kind of stuff. So if somebody's watching, maybe they're watching it in a couple of days from now over the weekend, and they say, I want to make a donation or I want to go hold signs on Election Day. So give them a flavor of who you are and make your final pitch and why. And whoever wants to go first, I'll leave it up to you guys as to who wants to go first or last.
Well, I went first at the beginning, so I defer to Joe here.
All right, thank you. Tom, thanks for hosting this event. I appreciate it.
Was it fair? Do you think it was fair?
I do.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
I do.
It's the only thing I care about.
Thank you, Adrian, for being here also. I want to thank those who are listening and thank those who are in the audience. I want to start by saying I started my campaign for state rep back on May 8th. And I thought the most important thing to do was knock on doors, to talk to people face to face, to understand what concerned them the most. I thought it was the least I could do to earn their vote. Today, I can tell you that I've gone to over 6,000 doors, and I have met some of the nicest people in the district. People who invited me into their homes, people who offering water during those 102-degree days, people offering me food at their kitchen table. It's been an unbelievable experience. And I want to share a story that I had that might shed some light on how you can expect me to represent you as state representative. One day when I was out there, knocked on a door, a young man came to the door. I handed him my door hanger and I introduced myself. The first thing he did was ask me, are you a Republican or a Democrat? And I said, I'm a Republican. At that time, he took the door hanger and he started to rip it up in my face. And I said to him, I told him, if I'm elected, and you've heard this before from me, and you come to me with a problem, I will not ask you if you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or who voted for you. I will simply help you because that's what a state rep should do. I also told him that I'm going to have office hours throughout throughout the district. So I'm going to work it as a full-time job. And I invited him, come and see me. We left on great terms that day. I will always be accessible to help the people of the 14th Essex District. And I hope that you will consider voting for me as your next state rep. You can reach me at my website, electjoefinn.com. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. Adrian, last word.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having
Was
me
I
here
fair?
today. You were fair.
Okay,
you
that's
were
all I
fair.
care. That's all
It's a
I
little
care.
smoky in here, but that's okay. You didn't
I had
smoke.
one hit.
I appreciate
I'm holding
it.
on to the end. Oh, two. I'm sorry.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So listen, if you had asked me in January of 2022 if I was going to be running for office, I would have told you no. But when I heard the seat was open, I felt it was my obligation and duty to step forth. I have always thought that my path in life was going to lead me here, and here I am. You know, I have a broad breadth of experience and am helping families through difficult matters every day. I know that I can serve this community well. And, addition to knocking doors, which I have also been doing, I've been meeting the community where they are. I'm going to events across the district. I'm meeting families at schools. I'm meeting police in the field. I'm going to all of the community, fall festivals. I've eaten so many cider donuts this past 2 months that it's a bit surprising. Because it's important for me and to understand this district, to understand how the needs of Groveland are different from the needs of West Newbury, are different from the needs of Amesbury, Boxford, and North Andover. I have met individuals who have strong beliefs and strong issues that they want to bring to the table right away. And I've listened and I've heard them, and I'm ready to serve. I'm able to get things done. I'm able to work with people to make a difference and to get that common goal met. I'm in the thick of it with my kids in the public education. I get it. I understand what you need. I understand that it's not as simple as, tax cuts or adding taxes. I understand that a lot of this job is constituent services and bringing money back to the district. And I'm following in big footsteps. Anyone who is familiar with Christina Minicucci knows that she has worked very hard and has brought a lot of money back to the district. And I plan to do the same. So please, I hope that I have earned your vote. My website is www.vote4 and then Ramos, RAMOS.com. That's voteforramos.com. I'm also on Facebook, on Instagram. You can email me at ramos4rep, the number 4 and then rep@gmail.com. And I'm going to answer everyone's questions. I'm not blocking voters from my Facebook page. I'm answering emails. I'm answering phone calls. I'm knocking on doors and answering questions. I have nothing to hide, and I hope that I can be your next state representative.
Can I get a commitment from each of you that if you win, you will come back and talk to the constituents after you win?
Yes.
Yes.
Joe, excellent. Thank you very much. The election is November 8th. Hopefully, if you're watching this, it's before November 8th. We have two really well-educated, very well-spoken, very nice individuals who are asking for your vote. It is Adrianne Ramos, and I've been saying Ramos, I'm sorry, because I'm from Lawrence, so that's, most of my neighbors say Ramos, versus Joe Finn. Adrianne is a Democrat. Joe Finn is a Republican. Whoever you vote for on Election Day, please vote. If you haven't already voted early, it is November 8th on Tuesday, and we want to thank all of our sponsors. Let's pull them up. I had them here. I was ready, and here it is. McLennan Real Estate, Century 21, State Senate candidate Sal DeFranco, Republican State Senate candidate Sal DeFranco, Clear Path for Veterans New England, Tomo and Shaken Seafood, Borelli's Deli, where I'm going to get my sausages like right now, EIS Investigation and Gun Training, Lazy River Products in Drake, Marsan and Son Construction, and AFC Urgent Care. Oh, we forgot Pleasant Valley. We can't forget Dave Idconsoli. We can't forget him at all. He'll be back in a couple of weeks after the election. Sounds like Mel Rotella says we got to go home, so go home already.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.